It's early morning in Canaan, around 1457 BC. The sky is clear, but every man in the valley knows the storm is already here. On one side, a young pharaoh who has waited half his life to truly rule, Thutmose III, the Napoleon of ancient Egypt before Napoleon ever existed. On the other, a rebellious coalition of Canaanite kings hiding behind stone walls and chariot lines, betting that Egypt is too slow, too cautious, too predictable to crush them. Between them lies a narrow mountain pass called Aruna, a route so dangerous that even the pharaoh's own generals beg him not to take it. If he fails, his army dies in a single file, trapped in a canyon of death. But Thutmose doesn't back down. He looks at the map, looks at the mountains, and chooses the impossible road. This is the story of the first great battle ever recorded in real military detail. The day when strategy, courage, and ego collided at a place called Megiddo. Welcome to Ironside warfare. Night hangs heavy over the Egyptian camp. Thousands of tents stretch like a second city under the stars, each one hiding warriors, chariots, horses, and fear. Torches flicker in the wind, making shadows dance across bronze helmets and leather armor. Somewhere a horse screams in the dark, sensing what is coming. At the center of this sea of soldiers stands a larger tent, decorated with banners of gold and deep blue. Inside, a young man in a war crown studies a map lit by oil lamps. His name is Thutmose III, pharaoh of Egypt. And tomorrow morning he will gamble everything on a road, just a road. To the north, beyond the hills and the darkness, lies a city with thick walls and a proud king, Megiddo. And waiting around that city, hidden in the valleys, in the passes, and in the shadows, is the largest coalition of enemy princes Egypt has ever faced. If Thutmose chooses wrong, his army dies here. If he chooses right, history will remember this as something else. The first great battle the world ever wrote down. The story of Megiddo doesn't begin with swords, it begins with silence. Centuries before this night, Egypt had risen like a golden sun over the lands of Canaan and Syria or Palestine. Cities like Megiddo, Kadesh, and Hazor paid tribute to the pharaoh on the Nile. Gold, grain, timber, and warriors flowed south, keeping Egypt rich and powerful. But power creates envy, and tribute creates resentment. For years, the kings and princes of Canaan bowed low before Egyptian envoys, forced to smile while handing over their wealth. They watched Egyptian garrisons march through their streets. They saw shrines built to foreign gods. They heard stories of pharaohs who called themselves lords of the two lands and of foreign lands besides. And quietly they see. Then came weakness, or at least, the appearance of it. The shadow of a woman before Thutmose III, Egypt had been ruled officially by a boy king. In reality, power lay in the hands of a woman, Hatshepsut, the stepmother and regent who took the throne for herself. Out in the provinces, in cities like Megiddo, the rumors were poisonous. Egypt is ruled by a woman now. The throne is unstable. The gods have abandoned the Nile. To the proud princes of Canaan, this sounded like opportunity. When Hatshepsut died and Thutmose III finally took full control, the damage was already done. Egypt's enemies had tasted the idea that maybe, just maybe, the giant could bleed. And in the north, one man decided to test that theory. The prince who defied the Nile. His name is partly lost to time, but ancient records speak of the Prince of Kadesh as the beating heart of the rebellion. Kadesh was no small town. It was a powerful city in Syria, guarding important trade routes, with strong walls and a long tradition of war. The Prince of Kadesh began to whisper, then to plan, then to move. He sent messages to other lords and city kings of the region. We are many, Egypt is far. Together we can break the yoke. Some refused. They had too much to lose. Others listened, and then, critically, one city moved to his side. Megiddo. Megiddo sat at a strategic crossroads between Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia. Control Megiddo and you controlled the key routes north. Lose Megiddo and Egypt's grip on the region would shatter like pottery. The Prince of Megiddo, seduced by promises of freedom or power, joined Kadesh. So did other cities. So did warlords. So did mercenaries, always ready to sell their swords. Soon a coalition army began to form. Not a professional, centralized army like Egypt's, but a patchwork of forces. Chariots from different cities, spearmen from local levies, archers familiar with the hills and passes, nobles who knew the land far better than the Egyptians ever could. They all gathered around Megiddo, the chosen fortress of rebellion. From there they sent one message to the Nile. We will no longer bow. A young pharaoh with something to prove in Thebes, capital of the Egyptian kingdom. The news hit like a spear. Tributes stopped arriving. Egyptian envoys disappeared. Traders reported seeing banners of Kadesh flying over cities that had once sworn loyalty to Pharaoh. The north was slipping away. Thutmose III was young but not naive. He knew what this meant. If Egypt tolerated such rebellion, every border would ignite. Nubian chiefs in the south, Libyan raiders in the west, desert tribes in the east, all would test the limits of Egyptian patience. The empire built by the great pharaohs of the past would begin to crack. So Thutmose did what pharaohs were born to do. He marched. The call to war. The royal scribes later carved the story of this campaign into the stone walls of the Temple of Amen at Karnak. Because of them, we know something extraordinary. We know where the army marched. We know how they debated strategy. We know the speeches, the doubts, the decisions. For the first time in human history, war is not just a blur of legend. It has coordinates, logistics, routes, and words. Egypt summoned its army, veteran soldiers who had fought in earlier campaigns along the Nile, charioteers, the elite arm of the Egyptian military, rich and proud, riding lightweight to-man chariots, archers with composite bows, the long-range killers of their time, support crews, craftsmen, engineers, scribes, servants, and drivers. This was not just a mob with spears. This was organized war. The march began from the fortress city of Sail in the eastern delta and moved northeast toward Gaza, then further into Canaan. Each day, Egyptian scribes recorded distances, stops, and supplies. Each night the camp rose and fell like a portable city, and all along the way messengers ran ahead and behind, carrying rumors. The coalition is bigger than we thought. The Prince of Kadesh commands them. Megiddo's walls will not fall easily. But Thutmose did not turn back. If anything, the danger sharpened his resolve. He wasn't just fighting to keep Canaan. He was fighting for his own place in history. 3 roads to destiny. By the time Pharaoh's army approached the region of Megiddo, scouts brought back a crucial report. There were 3 possible roads to reach the enemy. The northern route longer, safer, circling around the hills. The southern route also safer, giving the army room to maneuver. The central route through the Aruna Pass, direct but dangerously narrow and steep. If the army took the northern or southern roads, they would be moving along wide paths, less likely to be trapped. But they would also give the enemy time to reposition, maybe even encircle them. If they took the central road, the Aruna Pass, they could strike faster, catching the coalition by surprise. But if the enemy blocked the exit of the pass, the entire Egyptian army could be annihilated in a single day. Inside Pharaoh's tent, the council argued. Some commanders urged caution. "Let us not go by that narrow road," they said, according to the inscriptions. "It is too tight for horse and chariot. If they attack us there, not even a single one of us will be able to fight or to flee." They recommended one of the flanking roads, safer, more predictable. But Thutmose III had not come this far to play safe. The pharaohs gamble in the lamplight, over a map of rough papyrus. Thutmose listened in silence, then cut through the debate with words the scribes would carefully record for eternity. "I swear, as Ra loves me, my majesty will proceed on this road of Aruna. Let him who wishes among you go upon the roads you have spoken of, and let him who wishes among you follow my majesty." In modern words, his message was simple. "I'm taking the dangerous road. You can take the safe road if you want, but history only remembers those who move first." It was a psychological blow. What general would dare choose a different road than his king? What warrior would admit fear when Pharaoh himself walked into the jaws of danger? And so the decision was made. The entire Egyptian army would pass through the narrow, twisting road of Aruna, where a single landslide, a few burning trees, or an ambush from above could mean total destruction. That night, the camp was not quiet. Men sharpened blades, charioteers checked wheels, axles, and horses. Officers whispered about the risk. Some prayed to Amun, to Ra, to any god who might listen. Others tried to sleep, clutching their spears. But in the central pavilion, the scribes continued to work by flickering lamplight, recording everything. The speeches, the distances, the decisions. Because this was no longer just a war. This was a story being carved into stone. The dawn before history, as the first thin light of dawn stretched over the hills, the Egyptian army prepared to move. Chariots were lined up in columns, horses snorting clouds of steam into the cold air. Infantry tightened their belts, hoisted shields, and formed marching ranks. Scribes walked beside officers, ready to witness and record. Ahead lay the Aruna road, a narrow artery cutting through the hills, choked with rock and shadow. Somewhere beyond that pass, the coalition of Canaanite princes waited near Megiddo, confident that no sane general would risk this route. They didn't know Pharaoh had already made his choice. Thutmose III mounted his chariot, the gold on his armor catching the first light of the sun. He raised his hand, and an order rippled out over thousands of men. "Move." The wheels began to roll. Step by step, the Egyptian army entered the throat of the pass. If there was an ambush waiting, this would be the last sunrise they would ever see. But if there wasn't, if Pharaoh's gamble paid off, then the world was about to witness something it had never truly seen before, a full-scale recorded battle, with tactics, speeches, and outcomes preserved in stone. Not myth, not rumor, history. And at the end of that road, on a plain before the walls of Megiddo, the first great written battle in human history waited like a loaded bow. The road to Megiddo narrows, until it feels less like a path, and more like a trap. The Egyptians call it the Aruna Pass. To the soldiers staring at it in the pale light of dawn, it looks like a wound torn into the hills. Steep rock walls, sharp bends, and stretches so tight that 2 chariots can barely ride side by side. This is the road Pharaoh chose, and there is no turning back now. Into the throat of the beast, the order ripples through the ranks. Column by column, keep formation, no noise. At the very front rides Thutmose III himself, not hiding behind the safety of the rear, but leading from the spear point of the army. His chariot wheels creak as they hit the uneven stones. his horses snorting, their muscles trembling with contained energy. Behind him, the army stretches in a long, thin snake of bronze and leather, chariots rolling single-file infantry marching in tight ranks, pack animals piled with supplies, scribes, standard-bearers, officers, messengers. The once mighty Egyptian army, which could fill entire valleys with their numbers, is now compressed, vulnerable, strangled by geography. A single rock slide would block them. A fire set at the mouth of the pass would trap them. Archers on the cliffs above could turn this into a slaughterhouse. Everybody knows it. Every clatter of stone makes heads snap upward. Every shadow on the cliffs looks like a man with a bow. Every gust of wind that whistles through the narrow defile feels like a whisper. You should not be here. The ambush that never comes, minutes stretched like hours. The army moves slowly, cautiously. Chariot wheels scrape rock. Horses stumble, irritated at the slow pace. Sweat runs down the backs of soldiers, not just from the effort, but from fear. Some of the veterans mutter to each other, "If I were the Prince of Kadesh, I would block us right here. One force at the front, another at the rear, archers on the sides. We'd be finished." But the only answer is the echo of their own footsteps. No arrows, no boulders, no war cries. The coalition army has made a huge mistake. Confident that the Egyptians would never risk this route, the enemy has placed its main forces elsewhere, guarding the safer northern and southern approaches. They are waiting for an army that will never come. Meanwhile, Thutmose's army is threading the needle. One unit after another emerges from the darkest part of the pass into the growing light beyond. The hills slowly open, the path widens, the air feels less like a chokehold. First comes the pharaoh's vanguard, then the chariot corps, then the massive infantry. Slowly, the army spills out of the kill zone and onto open ground. They are still tense, still expecting something. But the enemy is not there. Thutmose's gamble has worked. The moment of realization on a small rise overlooking the plain, Pharaoh's scouts raise dust as they gallop back and forth. Their eyes scan the horizon, looking for banners, for movement, for the glint of bronze in the distance. Then they see it, Megiddo. The city rises on a mound, crowned with walls and towers. Around it, the land slopes down into a broad plain, ideal ground for chariots to charge and infantry to clash in ordered lines. But what's missing is just as important as what's present. The enemy is not blocking their exit from the pass. The enemy is not drawn up in full formation on the plain. The enemy is still scrambling, realizing too late that Egypt has appeared where it was least expected. Some enemy detachments are visible far away, dust clouds betraying units still repositioning. Others are gathered closer to Megiddo, protecting the city. What they are not doing is what they should have done. They are not annihilating the Egyptians at the choke point. Thutmose III knows what this means. He has not just avoided a trap, he has created an opportunity. the calm before the first written clash back on the plain. The Egyptian army is almost ready. Infantry stand in ranked blocks, shields forward, spears braced. Archers take their positions on the flanks and slightly ahead, ready to rain arrows at Pharaoh's command. Chariots form gleaming wings on either side of the main line, the elite corps that will decide the tempo of the battle. The banners of Amun-Ra and the royal falcons snap in the hot breeze. Thutmose's chariot rolls to the front of the army. He stands high, letting his men see him. To them, he is not just a king, he is the living Horus, the chosen of the gods. He raises his voice. We don't know his exact words beyond what the scribes recorded and stylized, but we know the message. You are the warriors of Egypt. The eyes of the two lands are upon you. Today we stand not just for land or tribute, but for the honor of the Nile itself. In other words, if we lose here, Egypt's power dies. If we win, the world remembers our names. In the distance, the coalition army begins to stir. Banners move, dust rises, chariots roll out from the city. The princes have finally decided they will meet Pharaoh on the plain, and scribes at the edge of the world at the rear of the lines. Near the command tents stand men who will not lift a spear today. They are the scribes, the quiet witnesses of empire. Reed pens in hand, wooden pallets with ink rolls of papyrus waiting for words that will outlive all of them. They watch the deployment. They listen to the commands. Some are assigned to officers, others to stay near Pharaoh himself. Their task is not to fight, but to remember. They will record the route taken, the decisions made, the outcome of the battle. The tribute taken afterward. For the first time in human history, a battle is about to unfold in front of witnesses trained to write everything down. No more half-remembered epics passed from mouth to mouth. No more exaggerated tales told by old soldiers around campfires. At Megiddo, war is stepping into the light of written history. Lines drawn in dust, the sun climbs higher. On one side of the plain, under foreign banners, the coalition gathers, chariots rattling into position, each with its local style spearmen forming uneven lines, archers from the hill cities taking positions where they can see and shoot. On the other side, the Egyptian army stands in ordered rows, like a tightly coiled fist ready to strike. Between them lies open ground. No walls, no passes, no excuses, only dust, air, and fate. Pharaoh looks out at the enemy who dared to challenge him. Somewhere in that mass of men is the Prince of Kadesh, the mind behind the rebellion. Somewhere behind those lines, within those walls, the Prince of Megiddo watches with clenched teeth. Thutmose grips his bow. This is not just about crushing a revolt. This is a message to every city, every tribe, every border lord who thinks Egypt has grown soft. You revolt once, you lose once, you lose once, and the story of your defeat is carved into stone. The drums begin to beat. Boom, boom. Signals ripple down the Egyptian lines. Charioteers lower their reins. Infantry lift their shields. Archers notch their arrows. The plain of Megiddo is about to transform from quiet earth into the stage of the first great recorded battle. The pass of Aruna is behind them. The walls of Megiddo are ahead. And between them, under the burning Canaanite sun, history sharpens its blade. The first arrow is always silent. It rises into the hot air above Megiddo, a thin dark line against the bright sky, and then falls somewhere unseen, lost in the distance between two armies holding their breath. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then, like a curtain tearing the battlefield, explodes into motion. The charge begins. Egyptian war drums pound from the rear, steady and relentless. The signal is clear. Advance. The archers step forward first, in long, disciplined lines. They plant their feet in the dust, raise their composite bows, and draw to the cheek. These are not simple wooden bows. They are layered weapons of horn, wood, and sinew, powerful enough to punch through shields at range. Pharaoh's standard lifts, loose. A black cloud of arrows rises from the Egyptian line, whistling as they cut through the air. For a moment they seem to hang, frozen above the battlefield. Then they fall. The front ranks of the coalition army shudder under the impact. Men scream, horses rear, shields ring like drums as arrowheads slam into them. The lines ripple but do not yet break. On the walls of Megiddo, watching from above, the princes and lords of the coalition see a sight they had hoped not to face. An army that moves like a single organism. Wings of bronze. Now it's the chariots' turn. On the Egyptian flanks, two great wings of chariots begin to move, wheels turning, horses tossing their heads. Dust billows behind them as they accelerate, first at a trot, then at a gallop. Each chariot carries a driver, focused on speed and control, a warrior armed with a bow and spear. Their lightweight design makes them faster than many of the heavier, clumsier Canaanite chariots opposite them. Thutmose III positions himself with the chariot corps for his men. Seeing him there with them, not hidden in safety, is like an extra shield around their hearts. The drums beat faster. The ground begins to shake. The Egyptians are not walking anymore. They are charging. The coalition responds across the plain. Panic is wrestling with pride. The coalition commanders shout orders. Forward, extend the line. Chariots, don't let them flank us. Their chariots move out to meet the Egyptian wings, while their infantry form a rough, bristling shield line in the center. Archers try to answer arrow with arrow, but their volleys are less coordinated, their training less consistent. Some contingents are brave and steady, others mercenaries, reluctant allies. Nervous levies are already thinking about survival rather than victory. Still, the front holds. The plain narrows, not with terrain, but with inevitable contact. Two moving walls of men, horse, and would draw closer and closer until distance is measured not in meters, but in heartbeats. Then the chariots meet. Impact. The crash of chariot against chariot is not a clean heroic clash, it's chaos. Egyptian drivers yank their horses to sudden turns, angling to rake the enemy flanks. Warriors in the chariot beds unleash arrows at point-blank range, then grab spears to stab at passing foes. Canaanite chariots, heavier and more front-loaded, try to smash through by sheer weight. Some succeed, tearing gaps through the Egyptian lines only to be hit in turn by flanking chariots that swing in from the sides like bronze hammers. Horses scream as blades find muscle. Wheels shatter. Splintered wood flies into the faces of drivers. Men fall and vanish under hooves and wheels, trampled into the dust. But beneath the chaos, there is a pattern. Egypt's chariots don't fight as lone heroes. They fight in units, maneuvering together. One rank harasses with arrows. Another rank swings wide to hit exposed sides. Small groups peel off to chase any enemy unit that begins to waver. Thutmose's training is paying off. The coalition's chariots brave, yes, but less disciplined start to lose cohesion. The infantry clash in the center. The infantry lines finally meet. The sound is like a door slammed by a guard. Shield against shield. Spear against spear. Flesh against bronze. Egyptian troops advance under heavy, rounded shields, spears thrusting in practiced rhythm. Their officers shout measured commands, keeping the lines tight, the formation intact. Opposite them, the coalition foot soldiers fight in a more uneven way. Some form decent ranks, others mill around, pushed forward by the pressure behind them. Different cities use different armor, different shield shapes, different tactics. At first, the lines hold each other in a brutal, grinding push. Men fight face to face, breath to breath, their world reduced to the few enemies directly in front of them. But war is rarely decided in the center. It is decided on the edges. Collapse of the flanks. On one flank, an Egyptian chariot squadron manages to smash through the coalition's outer edge. The moment they break the line, they wheel inward, driving along the enemy's side like a blade cutting along the seam of cloth. Arrows rain into enemy ranks from the side. Spears jab into unprotected backs and ribs. Shield lines begin to twist, buckle, and turn. The coalition infantry in the center, already hard-pressed from the front, now feel terror crawl up their spines. They are being rolled up from the flanks. On the opposite side, the story repeats. Canaanite chariots, unable to hold formation under continuous pressure, begin to pull back. A retreat in one part of the line exposes another. Gaps appear. Those gaps widen. Egyptian chariots surge through. What had been a battle between two lines becomes something else. A hunt. Panic at Megiddo at first. It's just a few men. A handful of coalition soldiers break and run, dropping shields, making for the city or for any point that looks like safety. But fear is more contagious than any disease. Others see them run and feel an ancient instinct stirring in their own hearts. If they're running, maybe we should run too. A murmur of movement begins to spread. Lines loosen. The pressure that held men in place begins to slip. An officer shouts for them to stand, but his voice is only one sound in a storm. Then something snaps. The coalition front line breaks. What had been a wall becomes a stream, then a flood of men running for Megiddo, for the gates, for the shadows of its walls. Egyptian archers and charioteers see it and do not hesitate. They press forward. The chase. It is one of the most dangerous moments in any battle. The transition from disciplined advance to wild pursuit. Egyptian chariots thunder after the fleeing enemy, cutting them down as they run. Some chariots overtake panicked soldiers, circling, firing arrows into their backs, then moving on to the next group. The plain becomes a tangle of abandoned shields, broken chariots, bodies, weapons glinting in the dust. Men throw themselves at the gates of Megiddo, clawing at them, trying to force their way in before the Egyptians can reach them. Horses rear and crash against the walls as their riders are dragged down. Egyptian sources later boast that some men were hauled up the walls by their comrades, using their own tunics as makeshift ropes, leaving their clothes behind in the scramble. It is not a glorious retreat, it is panic, a victory half won. And here, at the very moment of triumph, Egypt makes a mistake. Thutmose's troops see the enemy running and feel something roar inside them. The joy of survival, the hunger for loot, the ancient desire to grab what the defeated leave behind. Instead of pushing the pursuit all the way to the walls to trap and annihilate as many enemy troops as possible, many Egyptian soldiers peel away to plunder the abandoned camp of the coalition. Rich garments, weapons, chariots, gold and silver vessels, horses and equipment. The field around the coalition camp becomes a marketplace of chaos, with soldiers shouting, laughing, grabbing anything they can carry. The scribes at Karnak later record Pharaoh's anger carefully, respectfully, but clearly visible between the lines. He realized what his men had thrown away. If they had chased harder, faster, more aggressively, they might have captured Megiddo itself in that same day, storming the gates while they were clogged with fleeing soldiers. Instead, The city lives on, and now, like a wounded animal, it curls in on itself, pulling the surviving princes and their remaining forces inside its walls. The battle on the plain is over. The siege of Megiddo is about to begin, counting the cost when the dust finally settles. The Egyptians survey the field. They have won. The coalition army has been broken and pushed back into the city. Their camp and supplies are in Egyptian hands. Huge numbers of horses, chariots, armor, and precious goods are captured. The scribes will later carve lists of this loot into stone, line after line of tribute and spoils. For Egypt, this is proof. The rebellion has been crushed in open battle but not destroyed. The princes of Kadesh, Megiddo, and their allies are still alive, now behind walls, preparing for a different kind of war, a siege of patience, hunger, and negotiation. Thutmose III looks at the city on the hill and understands, we have broken their army. Now we must break their will. From battle to siege, the Egyptians move quickly to encircle Megiddo. They build a wooden palisade and defensive ring around the city, a wall of men and stakes to prevent anyone going in or out. Place guards on every road capturing messengers or supply runners. Establish a fortified camp that can withstand any sortie from the trapped coalition. Days pass, then weeks. Inside Megiddo, food supplies begin to shrink. Allies who once promised eternal loyalty start to question how long they want to share this prison. Outside, Egyptian scribes continue to write. They have recorded the march, the decision at Aruna, the battle on the plain. Now they will record something rarer. The moment when a victorious king decides not just to win a battle but to reshape the map, because for Thutmose III this is bigger than one city. It is about sending a message to every power in the region. You can rebel, you can gather an army, you can even survive a direct defeat, but you cannot outlast Egypt. As the siege tightens and the princes inside Megiddo slowly realize no help is coming, the Battle of Megiddo moves toward its final act. Not steel against flesh, but hunger against pride. The noise of battle fades. No more chariot wheels grinding into chariot wheels. No more lines crashing together. No more war cries rising over the plain. In their place comes a different sound, the thud of wooden stakes being driven into the earth, the creak of wagons forming barriers, the rhythm of hammers building something slow, patient, and deadly. The Egyptians are no longer fighting for the field. They are closing a fist around the city of Megiddo. The news tightens from the walls of Megiddo. The view has changed. Yesterday, the princes and their soldiers watched an open battlefield where their army once stood. Now they see Egyptian camps spreading across the plain, lines of tents and cooking fires organized in rows, palisades and ditches being dug around the city, patrols moving like ants cutting off every path. Thutmose III has decided that no one walks in or out of Megiddo without his permission. To his officers, he gives a clear command that the scribes will later record. Let us not allow a single one of them to go out of this city outside. Let us surround it as a circle of thorns. The message is simple. No food, no reinforcements, no escape. Megiddo is to become a trap for its own defenders. Wall against wall, Egypt does not storm the city. Storming costs blood, too much blood. Walls favor the defenders. A desperate enemy fights like a cornered animal. Instead, Thutmose builds his own wall. All around Megiddo, the Egyptian army constructs a continuous ring of wooden palisades, watchtowers, guard posts, ditches, and makeshift barriers. It's not stone. It doesn't have gates or towers like Megiddo's own defenses, but it doesn't need to. Its purpose is not to hold forever. Its purpose is to hold long enough. Long enough for food to run out. Long enough for morale to crack. Long enough for alliances to rot from the inside. The siege of Megiddo is a lesson in a different kind of warfare. Not the clash of blades, but the slow, deliberate weapon of time. Life inside the trap, inside Megiddo, reality hits hard. The soldiers, princes, and their retinues who fled from the battlefield now find themselves jammed together within the walls, along with the city's original population. Food that was meant to feed a city for months must now feed the local inhabitants, the coalition soldiers, the nobles, and their entourages. The math is brutal. Every extra mouth pushes the clock forward. At first, the princes try to keep order. Stores are counted, rations are measured, guards are posted at granaries. They still believe in outside help. Some cling to the idea that other cities, ones that didn't commit fully to the rebellion, will send relief forces. Others hope Egypt will grow impatient and leave. But as the weeks pass, that hope dries up like spilled water in the sun. No banners appear on the horizon except Egyptian ones. Life outside, the calm machine outside the walls. Egyptian life settles into a steady rhythm. Soldiers take turns on the siege lines, watching for escape attempts. Work parties cut wood, repair equipment, and maintain the wall of thorns. Scouts patrol the region, making sure no relief army gets close without being spotted. Scribes continue to record everything to the Egyptians. This is not wasted time. This is controlled time. They receive supplies from allied towns and vassals still loyal or too afraid to rebel. Fresh grain, cattle, and water keep the besiegers healthy. In the evenings, fires glow across the plain, a circle of light surrounding a slowly darkening city. For the men of Megiddo looking out from the walls, it's like staring at their own funeral. Psychological warfare. Thutmose doesn't just starve the body, he starves the mind. Small Egyptian detachments occasionally ride close enough to the walls to show their strength. Fresh horses, well-fed troops, captured banners, and equipment displayed as trophies. Sometimes, drums beat at night. Torches move in deliberate patterns, reminding the defenders that the army outside is not fading, not growing weak, not getting bored. The message is constant: we can do this forever. Can you? Inside, arguments begin. Princes who once spoke bravely of independence now argue over how long they can hold out. Some want to fight to the last. Some want to negotiate. Some secretly think only of saving their own skins. Coalitions are powerful in victory and fragile in defeat. Megiddo is now a prison where all those fractures grow deeper, day by day. The long wait time loses meaning in a siege. Days blur, the same sky, the same walls, the same routines. But the supplies do not blur, they shrink. First, the fresh food disappears. Then stored grain begins to run low. Meat becomes a luxury, then a memory. Hunger does what Egyptian weapons no longer have to do. People become thinner, weaker. Soldiers stand on the walls with hollow eyes. Whispers spread through the city like smoke. How much longer? When will Egypt leave? When will someone come to help us? The answer, visible from the walls, is no one is coming. Thutmose waits. For a warlike king, waiting can be harder than fighting. But Thutmose understands something crucial. A quick victory impresses. A controlled, total victory terrifies. If he takes Megiddo by storm, the story is, Egypt's won a battle. If he forces Megiddo and its allied princes to submit, hand over their weapons, their wealth, and their loyalty while still alive and watching, the story becomes, Egypt owns the north, so he waits. He holds religious ceremonies, thanking Amen for the victory on the field and praying for final submission. He consults with his officers and keeps discipline tight, preventing his troops from getting careless. And outside the Egyptian camp, that circle of thorns stays closed. Breaking point. We don't know the exact day when the princes inside Megiddo finally understood that resistance was pointless, but we know the result. After months of siege, with no relief in sight and their people weakening, the leaders of the rebellion make a decision. They will surrender, but not just walk out and bow. Ancient protocol, pride, and fear mix into something strange and symbolic. According to the Egyptian account, the princes send messengers to Pharaoh, asking for mercy. Then, in a dramatic show of submission, they climb down from the city walls using ropes made from their own clothing. Stripped of the fine garments that signaled their status, they present themselves as humbled men before an unbroken king. It is a staged moment, and it is powerful. The king above kings, Thutmose III, receives them with all the weight of empire behind him. He does not slaughter them. He does something far more effective. He turns them into examples. The princes bow low, touching the ground with their foreheads. They hand over hostages, often children or relatives, to guarantee their future loyalty. They offer tribute: gold, silver, copper, weapons, chariots, horses, and exotic goods collected from their lands. The scribes record the details with almost obsessive precision. How many chariots, how many suits of armor, how many animals, how many items of fine craftsmanship. This is not just bookkeeping. This is propaganda in numbers. It shows anyone who can read or hear the recited lists in a temple ceremony exactly how profitable loyalty to Pharaoh can be, and how expensive rebellion is. Mercy as a weapon. Why doesn't Thutmose simply execute the rebel princes? Because dead enemies cannot pay tribute. Dead cities cannot send soldiers. Dead rulers cannot be used as living warnings. Instead, Pharaoh uses controlled mercy. He restores the princes to their cities and positions. But now they are his vassals, not just in name, but in terror. Their safety, their status, their lives depend entirely on Egyptian favor. From this point on, whenever they look at their own walls or sit on their own thrones, they will remember, we once hung from ropes of our own clothing, begging this man to spare us. Megiddo is allowed to live, but it lives as a symbol of submission. The record in stone. When the campaign is over and Thutmose returns to Egypt, the victory is not left as a fading memory. It is carved literally into history. On the walls of the Temple of Ammon at Karnak, scribes inscribe the route taken from Egypt to Canaan. The debate about which road to choose, the bold decision to take the Aruna past the battle on the plain, the siege of Megiddo, the surrender of the princes, the tribute collected. This is not a neutral document. It is Egypt telling the world, this is how a god-king makes war. This is how rebellion ends. But beneath the self-praise, historians and storytellers centuries later find something priceless for the first time. We can see a campaign from the inside. Strategic debates, psychological gambles, logistics, the transition from battle to siege, the use of mercy and fear as political tools. Megiddo is not just a victory. It is the birth of documented warfare. Legacy of a siege. After Megiddo, Thutmose III continues to campaign in the region, cementing Egypt's control over Canaan and Syria. Many cities that once wavered now think twice. The lesson is simple. Pharaoh is willing to take risks. Pharaoh is willing to wait. Pharaoh is willing to crush you in battle and starve you in your own walls. The princes who survived Megiddo become living warnings to others, and long after they are gone, long after their cities have changed hands a dozen times, the story etched in stone remains. A young king took the dangerous road. He survived the kill zone. He broke his enemies in open battle. He starved their pride behind their own walls. And he made sure the world would never forget it.